Отже, колеги, в нас
Dear colleagues, I'm glad to greet you in the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. This week we are talking about the energy sector, and we have the event dedicated to the games at the entrance to the center. You could see the game the staff for the game, and we are giving the floor to Olena Pavlenko to explain us the rules of this game. Thank you very much. We would like to thank the Media Center for the Energy Sector Week. It was sometime when Theodore Roosevelt said when the person has no high educational background, the person may steal a lorry, but if the person has higher educational background, such person can steal a railway company. So it takes a long time to understand how the schemes works, how they nurture corruption in the gas sector, but we have been making attempts to find such rules of the gas games. These schemes are half legal. They are very complicated, and our research goal is not to find the guilty persons, but to recommend how to fill the gaps in the legislation of Ukraine and to establish a fair and honest framework. We used public sources and interviews in our research, both with the journalists, companies, extractive companies, and government representatives. The research lasted for 1 year. We have detected a dozen of schemes, and we have elaborated such map, which you can see in my hands now. Here we show how a private company may take from the state-owned company a good, productive deposit. The second scheme is when both private and state-owned companies work jointly and use manipulations to siphon the governmental budget funds. And the third scheme is how one can grab a deposit of hydrocarbons from a private company in which an investor has already put money. So you can use this game to learn every of these schemes. One of the important results of our research was that we have found that these corrupt schemes do not require top leaders of the country to be involved in them. The schemes can efficiently work with the mid-rank bureaucrats on the top, and courts play a very significant role. If you are a private company and the court has a conspiracy with the governmental body, then the investor will face a threat of disposal of his company. We proposed to bureaucrats and lawmakers to review the laws and to make the sector rules transparent. Talking about the mid-rank corruption, without public coverage in mass media of these schemes, one law enforcement body can't succeed in revealing the schemes. So a big component is to make the rules of the game more transparent. I understand so that Roman is the top, is the most, I would like to add the systematization of the corruption schemes is aimed to bring us to the right conclusions. Not only the demands of transparency, but also monitoring over the rules. These are the mechanisms to combat corruption. Not the rental rates are important, but the rules of the game and monitoring over their adherence to. We talk many times told that the board is issuing licenses to use deposits and to use subsoils. They play a very important role. Why a Game of Thrones in the gas sector? We traced the behavior of many stakeholders in the gas sector, and their behavior resemble the Game of Thrones. Some stakeholders are resemble feudal lords who can do everything in their sector without absolute lack of control. This concerns the assets of state-owned companies which could be illegally disposed of, and here we have identified 3 stages of control over gas deposit. It is better to play this game by 2 gamers. The first stage is when you are an owner of a state-owned company. Then you go to the next stage. Each stage consists of 6 sub-schemes. And moving along the scheme, you go through the way, and the winner shall be the one who has learned the rules of the game of these corrupt schemes. Why we have decided to use such a desktop game? Because these schemes have been talked about for a long time, but we would like general public to understand and to learn the schemes and to understand what are the losses for the country, for the budget of the country. And what stakeholders are involved and how these players cause losses to the interests of the society in general and the country. And what should be the rules when companies play fairly? So we offer you to play a game of Guess Thrones. Let's make this map narrower and smaller together. Well, after the budget was adopted yesterday, I think the MPs now have time to play the Game of Thrones, and I'm giving the floor to a representative of the Ministry of Energy Sector and Coal. Thank you very much. I would like to thank DiXi Group for this research because today Ukraine has a priority task to become energy independent because the aggression on the part of Russia started with the gas war. I would like to add the following comment. You said that this is almost a legal game. What are the gaps in the legislation? I would like to emphasize this point. The Ministry of Geology, the State Geological Service, opened deposits and provided them to the companies without any special permits issued. When Ukraine became independent, the principle of access to subsoil changed. Special permits are required now. So deposits are provided to use by the State Geological Service, and the law on State Geological Service gives a definition of state-owned companies, and Ukrgazvidobывання company is not among them. According to the law, this company can't get licenses without auctions, without participating in tenders. While NAK Nadra Ukraine has such opportunity, the second thing, another gap is in the resolution 615 and in one other resolution on auctions. It goes that bidders first of all, bidder's definition is not provided in the resolution. This is just some entity that can take part in bidding, but what kind of entity, it does not specify. Poorly explored deposits are not of interest for investors. All companies would like to get well explored deposits. They are depleted, and new deposits have not been explored for a long period. the Ministry of Ecology has the Committee of Subsoils in their subordination, and their functions include monitoring over the violations in the use of subsoil, and the Ministry of Energy and Coal, which I represent, has no influence on this process. So, in our opinion, the regulations should be changed so that they comply with the constitution, because the subsoil of Ukraine is the resource which belong to the people of Ukraine, but not to some companies. I hope that this research will play a role of an impetus to fill the gaps in the legislations and regulatory acts. If unless we take urgent actions, we will not change the situation. The situation requires fundamental changes. Yes, this game should be like an explanatory note to every program in the gas sector. Thank you for your speech. Oleksiy Orlovskyi, Renaissance Foundation Director of Program Initiative Democratic Practices. The Renaissance Foundation supported this project. Why we did so? Because it is very important for us to provide transparency of the energy sector. Because we understand that all schemes existing now, they are linked to the lack of transparency in the gas sector, the lack of access to information about the developments in this sector. The main advantage of this game and this research by DiXi Group is that it's not a theory, it's not hypothesis that it could be this or that way. Specific cases have been analyzed, and specific names and companies are named in the research which used this or that scheme. They are directly named. The task was not to popularize the corrupt schemes. Of course, they are in place in the public space. This is a kind of an extract from the information of journalistic research and other information which can be received from courts, etc. This is a systematized presentation of the entire information available, and this is the main advantage of this research. Unless and until we open all the information in this sector, until we make the rules of the game, the conditions of the contract transparent and open, we will get more and more schemes invented by these big stakeholders, playing not virtually but in practices in our everyday lives. That is why the transparency issue is very important, and the Renaissance Foundation support many initiatives aimed at transparency in the gas sector. I would like now to remind the extractive industries transparency initiative, which was mentioned in the National Action Plan for partnership and open government, where Ukraine took a commitment to publish a report on EITI, and this month it has been published. But it is obvious that even this document, this report, although it is commitment of the government, it contains many gaps because the companies does not provide full information. This is one more evidence that the companies are not interested to be transparent in a due manner. That is why we will be supporting such initiatives further. And we will do this in the regulatory framework as well, so that after some time we can name the gas sector transparent. Yes, the concept of the gas thrones game was proposed when Olena came to me. She asked me to make an infographics to make these corrupt schemes, 14 corrupt schemes, transparent. Here we can see only steps which are transposed on the map of action. They are only stages, and they are circled. 14 corrupt schemes should have been input on the map. It was a challenging task, and the idea was, here we can see an official field. It was quite another layer. Not the DiXi Group, but very professional experts invented this game. This map, this is a map of cheap codes. When some virtual game or desktop game is played, there are some cheat codes allows to skip some rules, and these cheat codes they helped us to see how the rules, official rules, are bypassed and skipped. You can pack the chips to skip the rules into the law. For this reason, the law should be made alone. Then you can hide the gaps in this law. So, we promote the idea of what is happening in Ukraine. A game of gas thrones is ongoing in Ukraine. The combat continues. We have a kind of a wall like in a TV series, and we have the stakeholders who can introduce their own rules. And what we have seen when we made this map, The cheat codes, they are not in the minister's portfolio. And when we talk about the gas sector and tell that once we replace ministers, the rules of the game would change. No, this is not so. The cheat codes are not in their portfolios. They are in mid-rank bureaucrats' portfolios. So when we find those persons, we will find the rules. The second thing which we understood, that the country loses very much resources. The first resource is a gas resource, the second resource is money. But at some stages we lose some more things, such as image of the country. We lose reputation, and we lose tangible resources which could hardly be returned later. These losses are visualized in our game, on our map, in the rules in which feudal lords, owners of the gas thrones, play. I'm very glad that after half a year of our work on this simple game, with very simple and understandable explanations of its rules, the game element is important, but the primary goal was to transform this map into the road map of changes in the countries. It could be used as KPIs. For example, when we will mark the benchmarks, the changes have been made in a ministry, and we put one tick, then the changes have been made to the legislation, and we tick another item, and finally we will see that all Ukrainians will benefit from the changes, because this is not about individual benefits, personal benefits of a ministry or a stakeholder. Thank you.
Think it's better to say about proportional changes, not about proportional additional $10 or $20 million. And the question that is now in the presentation that was online, where to buy this game, what are the conditions, how to disseminate it, and during Christmas holidays, that would be the most popular game, maybe. The game will be in open access, and we have the opportunity to present hard copies. Please come to Ukrainian Energy site, and tomorrow it will be freely acceptable, and the research also will be presented there. Colleagues, do you have some comments or questions, and maybe some comments on these codes, or cheat codes, or cards? Glevcom, can I present it to my grandkids, or they will become corruption officials in future? This map can be used as any other thing, for good things or for bad things, and I believe that it can be very good for everyone. Maybe some schemes will be complicated but of course we will bring it to the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and maybe it will help them in their activity. The Vitaly Knyzhansky Day newspaper. I would like to remind you an anecdotal story. that people try to get some land plots, and and some person throw his hat and say, I will plant some beetroot there. So these schemes are used in the effort to earn more and to create capitalism in Ukraine, and I believe that this is a rule. But don't you think that directed efforts in order to liquidate these schemes could lead to bad results? Namely, there was a proposal to to deprive all licenses, to deprive Ukrnafta from all the licenses. But what would happen in the effect of this action? In this research, we wrote our own indicators and proposals as what we believe can change the situation with these schemes. We don't propose to deprive someone of licenses. And one of the schemes described here, and we believe that this is a negative practice. It was used twice in Ukraine when a centralized decision was made, and then General Prosecutor's Office was involved. They took the licenses from the companies. And maybe some good intentions were behind this, but for investors it was a negative signal that you can suffer from someone's hand management. And that's why we propose not to act like this. We propose, for example, we believe that what is more important now is to review this provision that concerns licensing, and it's not about Укргазвидобування only. In times of Yanukovych, these opportunities were used by many companies, by Pan Stavitsky and a company that they created with Nadra joint enterprises. Nadra Ukraine got shares, and they took it without outside the auction, and there are other opportunities to take these shares outside the auction, and we should start with this. So if we are speaking about the auctions, there are possibilities and opportunities to write better procedure of these auctions, and also we should work that the companies that work in extraction sphere, if they extract gas, please extract the gas, but why make some steps that infringe this? And with what are the subcontractors and the contracts with them? And you should make these transactions transparent. If there's a commercial secret as to the sums, okay, this is a separate issue that can be discussed. But to avoid problems that existed for years, and for example, when the oil fields were transferred to private hands, and why many people say that about this joint agreement. Let's elaborate this agreement, not just reject everything and start from square one, but just continue. We should provide some remedy for the problem, not just destroy everything we don't like. We don't want to turn game of gas thrones into the witch hunt. You say that the liquidation of these schemes can lead to bad results. The worst results are now here in Ukraine, and it's difficult to imagine something worse. According to ITI research, oil and gas is 0.10% of the economy. So these and after Holland and Norway, and Norway got 100 million tons per year, and Ukraine, it got only 1.3. So we should change the approach towards this. We should make an objective to extract resources, and not just if we don't extract, we depend on our neighbors. Unfortunately, from both sides, we're dependent from the east and from the west, and it's not good. We should change our legislative basis in order to prevent these schemes and to help develop the extraction field in Ukraine. Artur Somov, joint activity. And do you understand that all this investigation about licenses of the companies, that these licenses should be provided for free, for a kopeck? Yaroslav, do you want a license? Okay, take it. The question is, it doesn't matter how they are provided, by corruption or by rule. But there should be clear rules of the game. If the company doesn't start extraction in a definite term, 3 or 6 months, so this license should be rejected. And as Bernanke told us, that the money should be thrown through the helicopter to extinguish the crisis. So we should just provide these licenses to anyone who wants it. So Golden Daily, for example, if they sell it at market price and pay rent and taxes, so it's good for Ukraine. And the second thing is it's the game of robbers and policemen. Snapshot at the moment on the 25th of December. The rules will change, and I will just create new schemes. Maybe for this today it's a great book, but new schemes will appear. But the issue, the most important thing is how to regulate correctly. So maybe we meet in a year for the presentation of the new book. And I think we didn't see one more scheme. Some issues were described, but here, this year, a new scheme appeared to return actives with, to return assets with the help of rents. And so many. So private companies, and someone wrote joint activity, but joint activity is rather other companies will also be involved in this. So this is one more scheme. Maybe it's more legal, but it's so we would have one agreement. For example, and then all conditions will be infringed, but by these levers they will require the return of the assets. Maybe it's not right, but this is one more scheme. When state got the money, it is called taxes. So this is the citation from someone. But if we are speaking about this terminology, Mr. Somov, we will be very glad if you will tell us about other schemes that you elaborated. But I would say that we investigated these schemes from the end of 1990s. Those schemes that we found, and this is not only a snapshot of today. We also researched the activity of Oleksiy, then how Yulia Tymoshenko government worked and Yevhen Holovatiuk government, and we hope that these are more broad things, and when new schemes will be developed, they will be in the limits of these old schemes that were described. Partly it is stated here, and I told about it, that there were efforts to call off the licenses, but there was an order of the Cabinet of Ministers, and according to this order, the General Prosecutor's Office started the case, and then they recalled the license. And what we do in this research, that these joint activity license, they can be, but our proposal is to write this agreement, to conclude it among the companies, private and state companies. This should be done in more detail, and this cooperation should be more transparent, because we have facts of manipulation, they are present, but we can just try to stop this or to prevent in the future. Thank you. I want to tell you that free licenses is a broad issue. If for exploration, so we can provide it, but for other activity, that should be considered in more detail. When we prepared this report, we made requests to everyone, provide us with some information. They didn't present information to us. Those who worked in joint, the framework of joint activity, if there was some activity that do not have government share, so they you don't provide any data about your companies. I'm sorry. When we got data for ITI report, we asked everyone, and in the report it is stated that 30% of the companies weren't found, and others, they just didn't provide. Half of the companies didn't provide any data, and at that time there was no such a law, and they just rejected these requests. They didn't provide information, and if you are asked to provide some information for transparency, please do this, because the consequences will be easier to correct. Why there's no such one companies that are holders? They got a license and then they are going to sell it. Why there's no such a list of these companies? Because this is an example how to steal money, and these licenses are provided mostly for exploration, and the scheme for the free license, they got it, and then they go to court, and then they just give back the oil field that was already extracted. So yes, they can take license, do nothing, then create you create some other company, then this company buys this with your license, and then you go back and say that you're a new company and you can do your business. So our task is not to use these schemes for our own interests, but to understand why it happens so. and why our legislation and regulatory bodies don't prevent it. And there's a single social tax. I can write a big book for how to turn money into cash and pay it to the employees. And maybe if we change the schemes, this system of payment of salaries will be transparent. So every event has its cause, and we can find and invent any schemes. We should find real reasons, not the consequences of the situations. I am, as a moderator, I would like to answer. The problem is if there's no such publications, such reports. So this is always a discussion about the views. If we have a publication, ITI report, and the report that is in the form of the game, it gives the opportunity to rationalize the situation, to discuss it in the government and in the cabinet of ministers and in Verkhovna Rada. And if we are speaking about the situation, the main idea is that for each practice that exists, there should be research, and the quality of our discussions in the parliament, it becomes more of quality. So this is my view. Some additional comments? Thank you. And I agree with you. Due to the publications of ATI public report and through this report, we saw a disastrous situation of the sphere in our country. And I represent the Ministry of Energy and Coal. The question is not of the sphere. This is the question of other bodies. So we should provide the state with the heating, for example. A person needs security, heating, and food. So we should provide energy for heating. And due to this such research, we can show that the situation is disastrous. We should change laws and legislative acts in order to make this market transparent, and there should be many players. This will be good for the market. Artur, I agree with you that the taxation is high in the sphere, and the report of EITI is showing this, and the main companies, they benefit from showing that this 25 million of taxes, this is the defense budget of the state. But at the same time, this is the issue of our cooperation, and we are speaking now that the sense to speak with the companies about social agreement, when the government and society, they propose to the companies more effective regime of taxation, regulation. Please work in, and from you, we ask that you should be more transparent regarding information in order to, in 2 clicks, verify the information that you work, not just holding license, but you know that some companies just hold license and do not provide any activities. So you should do what you are obliged to do. And this is fruitful cooperation, and everyone will be satisfied. And except of these schemes or new ideas, do you have some questions? Please ask. And let's Gorlashka Alexander. They said that you can provide licenses, and maybe I will agree. And my question is connected to this, that maybe they should provide licenses for those oil fields that, and the shell companies, shell company, it left Ukraine, and we say that some companies want to hold these licenses. And what about the licenses as to the attractiveness? Because you can have this drill, you can change the pump, invest something into it, and then pump it for $3, and you can also use some technologies and extract shale gas, and it's a huge amount of money. And the attractiveness of this project is different. So about transparency of this information. I thank you for your question. According to our legislation, the information on resources is the information for only for official use, and we have an undistributed fund of oil fields, and we won't speak about the attractiveness, and the issue of cost is the issue of the enterprise, and if they get special permit, they provide a business plan, investment project, and they should assess whether it will be cost effective. So this is a capitalization of the company. That's why this is the issue of the entities, and not any entity has the access to the information, not to the getting of these licenses freely. So we all speak about it, that due to this research we can see where we have gaps in the legislation, and Shell went out of Ukraine, and Chevron also left Ukraine. This is not because of the cost, but for other reasons. They went because our legislation does not correspond to the market, and we have many norms from the Soviet times when other principles of using resources was used. So going to the from the market of these two companies of the shale gas demonstrate us the situation that is created. And now if you have some proposals, maybe DiXi Group and everyone who was involved in the creation of this game, they will develop this issue, and after the game, starting from the 1st of January, the deputies will work effectively on the energy reforms, and all this report will be used for the development of regulation in the sphere of energy. That will be very helpful, and I hope that will be successful. Thank you for your work. And I stress that on the side of Ukrainian energy site, you can download in a good quality all these materials, and during Christmas holidays you can spend effectively and interesting. Thank you very much.